Hello, Psych 101 students, and welcome to this online Introduction to Psychology class. I'm Professor Rubenstein. I hope you know about me already. This is the second video I'm making. There's an introductory one under Content. If you go to Start Here, the name of the folder is Start Here, and then you go to a file called Learn About This Course. So you should do that first, but this is information about Unit 1. So in Unit 1, this is where we start talking about psychology. You have assignments to read in your free textbook. All of this information is under the Unit 1 folder under Content, so you should be looking at that. And you should also have printed out your course calendar so you know when everything is due. For Unit 1, you have to do several things. You take a course requirements quiz. It's very simple. It's just a review of the syllabus. It's worth 28 points, so I suggest you do it. And you can take it as many times as you need to until you get a perfect score. You also have to upload your first 2 discussion posts this week. And the most important thing about that, you can get information about how to do it here, also under the Unit 1 folder. But please, please do me a favor and make sure you write 250 words at least for each of the 2 posts. The most common reason that students get 0 points for discussions is that they just write 1 or 2 sentences and they think they're done. You're not done. So please just make sure it's 250 words. That's only about a couple paragraphs. It's not that long, but you have to think through your points and you can't just brush it off in a couple sentences. And the other thing you have to do is take the Unit 1 exam, which you should be doing after you've read the material from the free textbook. And here I want to give you a little secret hint. So I'm going to be making these videos for every single one of the 8 units in this class. This is the first one. And I will be highlighting the material that's in the exams. So you do not have to watch these videos. They are not required. But I guarantee you, if you watch them, you will do better on the exams because I am going to give you lots of big and little hints about what's on the exam. Okay, so let's get started. Unit 1, we're going to be talking about the science of psychology and also about biopsychology, so things having to do with the brain. Some of the most important things you need to know, big hint here, is that the definition of psychology is the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. And this just means that we try to describe, explain, predict, and maybe even change human behavior. That's the hardest part. But all of this, again, is in your free textbook. You should be looking it up. And we do this with the scientific study. So we don't just observe things like, oh, you know, I have an aunt who's depressed and she has low self-esteem, so maybe those 2 things are related. That's not science, that's just an anecdote. We have to study people like your aunt. So we have to study 100 people or 200 people or 500 people with varying levels of depression and then compare them with their measured self-esteem to see if, in fact, the 2 variables are related. That's called correlational research, by the way. So you look and see if one variable is related to a second variable. And as one goes up, does the other one go up? Or as one goes up, does the other go down? So an example of a correlation, for example, would be height and weight. Most people who are taller also weigh more. So that's a positive correlation. As height goes up, so does weight. And by the way, one doesn't cause the other. Tall people aren't caused to be fat, or fat people aren't caused to be tall. The same is true, for example, height and shoe size. So in general, taller people have bigger feet. You wouldn't want very short people to have giant feet, so that would be a negative correlation. As one goes up, the other goes down. So all of this, again, is in the lecture notes. I've given you lecture notes for my in-person classes. You can review them, and you can also look at the textbook. You need to know things like personality studies. Use the Big 5 test. You will be taking a version of the Big 5 test in this class. You have actually 20 self-tests that you'll be taking, and they will help you explore who you are. So your personality, your level of sleep deprivation, your self-esteem, for example, your locus of control, whether you think it's internal or external, how you relate to food, whether you're obsessive compulsive, all those things. And there are 20 of those tests in this class. And starting in Unit 2, you will be taking at least 1 or 2 of them pretty much every unit through the end of the class. And those are required. You have to take those tests. And then you just take a little tiny quiz after you take the test to make sure that you calculated your score correctly. All the explanation for this is in the syllabus, so don't worry if you don't understand what I'm saying. Just go back to the content browser and look under the syllabus, and there will be an explanation. You need to know what independent and dependent variables are, and that just means the independent variable is the thing that the groups, the 2 different groups you have, for example, people with high self-esteem, people with low self-esteem, and then the dependent variable is what you're measuring. So, for example, you might be measuring the levels of depression in people with high self-esteem and people with low self-esteem. Another better example of that would be if you did a study of whether alcohol makes people more aggressive, for example, and you could do observations in a stadium, in a baseball stadium or a football stadium, and you could get 100 men to be volunteers, and half of them you could make drink 5 cups of water. The other half would drink 5 cups of beer. That would be the independent variable. That's the thing you're manipulating. And then you would observe them and measure how many times they scream at the ref, how many times they hit their partner or their friend with their fist, how loud their yelling is, whatever measure of aggression you might want to do. And then you would compare the 2 groups, the ones that drink water with the ones that drank beer, and you would see which ones exhibit higher levels of aggression. So the beer or the water group is the independent variable. That's the thing you're manipulating. And the thing you're measuring is level of aggression. Again, all of this is in the textbook, so don't worry if you don't understand this quick explanation. Double-blind studies, often when we test drugs, for example, when you test about whether a vaccine will work for COVID, you do a double-blind study. So that just means the person giving you the shot does not know which group you're in, whether you're getting the placebo, which just means the control group, you get no medication, or whether you're actually getting the medication. So you don't know what you're getting, and the experimenter doesn't know, and that's called a double-blind test. And it's important because sometimes people, if they have expectations, if they know which group you're in, it can change your behavior, maybe not for things like COVID, but for example, if it was an antidepressant they were testing, they might treat you differently depending on whether they knew you were getting a real medication or a placebo, just no drug. What else? There are limitations of research. We do empirical research in psychology, and we don't make guesses. We don't do pop psychology, which is deciding that 6 people said that magnets put on their arms help them feel less stressed. That's not empirical research. That's just anecdotes, and it's superstition maybe. So we do empirical research using the scientific method. And if you want to know what that is, please read the textbook and also read my lecture notes. There are limitations in psychological research. Most of them have to do with sample size. So if you wanted to find out whether a vaccine works for COVID, you wouldn't test just 10 people. That wouldn't be enough. That's kind of obvious. You'd need 1,000 people, 10,000 people. And in fact, that's what those drug manufacturers did. They tested thousands and thousands of people. In psychology, we don't need to test that many people, but we certainly need to study more than 10, for example. If we want to study the relationship between depression and self-esteem, we study 100 people. We study 200 people. So there are limitations to research, and usually in most cases, the more participants you have, the more people you're studying, the more reliable your results. So all of this, again, please look it up. There are several types of research. You need to know what longitudinal research is. For example, that's when you study people, the same people, over a long period of time. So, and there have been some very famous studies of people. They start studying them when they're 5 or 6 years old, and they study them throughout their lifetime. So at 15, at 20, at 25. And if you study the same person, you can really find out changes in personality and other kinds of traits that you can't do if you study people only once. That research tends to be, obviously, it takes a really long time and it's very expensive. Often the researchers who study it die before the study is over. So then new people have to come in and continue to study the people until all the people in the research study actually die. And those kinds of research studies are rare, but when they do them, they are really, really valuable and really important. And you'll see that when we talk about developmental psychology, which is just the study of human behavior and thoughts and emotions from birth or even before birth all the way to the end of life. So that's longitudinal research. There's correlational research, where we look at two variables and see if they're related. So if you want to know if IQ is related to income, for example, you could study that. You would test people's IQ. You would look at how much money they've made over their lifetime and see if smarter people make more money. You could look at, again, height and weight. I talked about that. Simple. They're physical traits that are very simple to measure, and they're obviously, most of them are correlated, strongly correlated. Psychological research is more difficult rather. So you need to know whether people who are tall are more intelligent, and that probably would be a zero correlation. So correlations can be positive, they can be negative, or they can be zero. And if you have zero correlation, it means there's no relationship between your height and your IQ, and that's pretty much obvious. But we do research and we can tell you whether it's true or not. All correlations, by the way, can only range from +1 to -1. So for example, a batting average is a correlation. It tells you how many times the person has been up to bat and how many times that person gets a hit. So if you have a batting average of 500, that's 0.5. It means half the time he or she is up to bat, he gets a hit. A batting average of 1,000 would be perfect. That's a 1.0. So that person gets a hit every single time he or she is up to bat. So again, all of this is in my lecture notes. It's in your textbook. And I hope I'm highlighting the things that are really important for you to know about when you take your Unit 1 exam. And so I wish you the best of luck in this class. Feel free to email me if you have any questions. My email address is in the syllabus. And that's it. So good luck on Unit 1, and I will see you for Unit 2 very soon. Bye-bye.